Welcome to Unity Now, the podcast where we discuss unity in the face of division. Inspired by the Unity 2020 plan, we strive to unite Americans by highlighting the middle ground between the two dominant parties and promoting the individual over groups. Each episode, we will bring you exciting, well-informed guests and host nuanced conversations about politically charged subjects. Our goal is to bring an end to the ideological war threatening the collective well-being of this great country.
Welcome back to the Unity Now podcast. I'm your host, Toby Davis. For this episode, I have the distinct pleasure to sit down with the current mayor of Burbank, California, Bob Frutos, and the former mayor of Burbank, Anja Reinke. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've brought the two of you today to talk about your respective backgrounds in the City Council of Burbank, each of your tenure as mayor and local politics, how it compares in contrast to national politics. So if you don't mind, we'd like to get just a brief background from both of you. Bob, starting with you, if you don't mind.
Well, I've been living in Burbank now for the past 28 years, and my professional background is I just retired after 28 and a half years of being a Los Angeles police officer. Some of the assignments were patrol, narcotics, working as a fugitive warrant officer, extraditing people from Latin countries back to the U.S., to working in the chief's office and working on social justice type issues under Chief Charlie Beck, to now being on the council.
Great, thank you. And Anja?
Well, I have an undergraduate degree in voice performance, and then I decided I wanted to make some money, so I went to law school and became a lawyer. So I've been a practicing lawyer for 31 years now. And at some point in the middle of that, I decided to run for public office, and I did so and got elected. And as part of that process, I was also the mayor of Burbank for a while.
And how long ago was that you were the mayor?
I was the mayor in 2011 to 12.
And I believe, if you don't mind my asking, what is the expected tenure of a mayor? And I believe you decided not to run again. Is that right?
That's right. I had family issues. They did not like having a public official in their family. So I got some pressure from them to not run again. So I didn't run again. I had higher aspirations, but it was just too hard on my family. So I bowed out. There's other things I can do in life that can still be of public service and helpful to humanity. So I was the mayor for 1 year. In the city of Burbank, the city council is elected, and the city rotates the mayors based on a nomination by their fellow city council members. So that's what happened. So my rotation was during 2011 and 2012.
Thank you for going into that, how that rotation works. And so, Bob, your time began, I believe, in December of just this past year. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, this is my second time being mayor. I was the mayor for 2015-16, and my peers nominated me and voted for me this go around this past December. So I'm back in the driver's seat second time around.
How has it been taking over really still during kind of the middle of a pandemic? How does that vary from the last time you took over?
You know, this is actually very trying. It's a lot has changed since I was a mayor in 2015. Back in 2015, you had a pretty good, strong, solid council that liked them. The members liked each other. We really dove into a lot of problem solving. But most important, we were in the community. We had different type of community events, so all council members could have that one-on-one interaction with the constituents. Where in 2015, with the stay-at-home order, no city functions, no community live participation at City Hall, there's a big disconnect, and there's a lot of frustration because there's mixed messages coming from the federal government at that president at that one time, to what Sacramento wants us to do, to what the county wants to do, to the residents' expectation for being an independent city, that we can go against the health safety officers' direction at the county level. So it's been a trying adventure.
I will say that's what I miss the most about public service and being on the council, was being out there and talking to the community, because it really is the most rewarding part of being on the city council or being the mayor or the vice mayor or any other position like that you really do get to go one-on-one. And Burbank's a microcosm of the rest of the country. And so you get to hear very differing opinions for different reasons, and it is rewarding. And then trying to understand where people are coming from and to kind of guide them along to get to a certain place that works with not only the city council but also with their fellow community members is challenging, as Bob says. So you have to handle things with diplomacy and fairness. I think people want to hear that you're trying to be fair and you're hearing them out, even if you don't agree with their point of view. At least they feel like they were heard by you. And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed hearing what the public had to say and what their goals and aspirations were at the time that I was on the council. And of course, those goals and aspirations of a community do change over time, depending on, it could be anything. It could be the political climate. It could be something like a pandemic. But I think Bob is right. I think you lose a lot of that one-on-one during a pandemic. And it's as convenient as Zoom and all these other electronic means of communication are, it's really not the same as one-on-one, seeing someone right in front of you, making eye contact with them and feeling sort of the general vibe of a person.
So true. Yes. I was going to say before we started, that Todd there, our great sound engineer who brought the two of you together, he always talks to us about being an introvert. And I always kind of snicker to myself because I'm myself a self-professed introvert. But even during these times, I have craved social interaction even more immensely. So I think that's a sign that, we've been stuck indoors for too long, for sure. How has Burbank over the years, and especially now, compared from both of your perspectives to at least what we are told is happening at a national level, where half the country supposedly hates the other half of the country and vice versa? And, we are so divided, and we are told so on social media and by mainstream media, the like, almost every day. How has Burbank as a microcosm, as you said, how has it compared to that? Bob, what do you think? How is it compared, and how is it behaving now?
Going back to what Anja said and I said at the beginning, the most rewarding part about being a council member is the interaction, the one-on-one connection. But because we've gotten away of what local politics mean to people. When I first got elected 7 years ago, Anja and I first met her when we served together as colleagues on the police commission. We were both police commissioners. When I first got elected 7 years ago, there really wasn't partisan. There was no party affiliation. It was 5 people getting elected. The campaign is over. Now let's work and collaborate amongst each other to bring out the best policies forward to benefit the masses across the city. Today, with the pandemic, with the former president, with the current president, with what happened on January the 6th, it has really gotten to a boiling point where there is now party lines. In this last election, it wasn't really about who the majority of the 107,000 people that live within 17 square miles, which is Burbank. This last election proved that it was more on party lines. And in the past, it wasn't about party lines. People were really interested. How long have you been in Burbank? What type of nonprofit organizations have you been involved with? What is your professional background? Tell me about your family. People back then would expect a candidate to go to their house, door knock them, introduce themselves. Some of them would just feel honored you came by. Other people, man, they had a whole litmus test that you had to pass to get their support and put your sign on their property. This last election, because you couldn't go door to door, the unions got heavily involved, and it became what party do you belong to? So it has changed, and I don't think that's good, because local politics should be not party driven, but should be based upon moving the city forward, being a true leader that can collaborate and motivate people to help, you develop better policies to address the issues for the masses. So it has changed a lot.
Thanks, Bob, for that. And Anja, from your perspective, do you believe it's changed, and did it start to change back when you were mayor, do you believe?
No, we, like Bob said, we didn't run on any partisan platform. And as a matter of fact, I didn't even know Bob had a maybe different point of view until Todd set this up today. And then when I ran, I don't consider that. I talk to people, I see what their point of view is. I don't ask for their party affiliation. I frankly don't care, because I'm talking to people on a different level back then and even now. And then Gary Brick we ran together and were elected together. And I believe I've learned since then that Gary is the opposite of me. So I think he's a Republican. Not even 100% sure. I never thought to ask him, but I kind of gathered that. But Gary and I are friends, been friends for a long time. And I think that the issue with people these days is that sometimes they don't even know what their party's about. And that is the problem. You just take a side without really understanding what the platform is of that party or what the heart is of that party. You just are that party, and then you just tend to tune out things. So I think there's a different climate now, and Bob's right, there's a different climate now because the country is polarized, and I think we need a cooling off period and it hasn't been very long since the election is over. And once the cooling off period happens, I think that people will come together more and speak about the issues that they're interested in. And I could be talking to someone who may be interested in the arts, because that's a big thing that I'm interested in. And they are interested in some fundamental economic sorts of things, but I may agree with them on that. And unless you have a conversation with someone, it's really hard to disagree about a lot of things on the planet unless you're working really hard to do it. If you actually talk to someone. But if you're just going to take the position, this is my party and this is where I stand, then clearly you can't move forward and you can't move past that. It's like not seeing past the color of someone's skin. I'm not going to look at them or talk to them because they are a certain ethnicity or come from a certain group. And I think that's certainly the wrong approach, and it's led to not only local non-peace but world non-peace too, because we tend to identify people, categorize them, and generalize about them instead of actually talking to them. And then a lot of media and movies and television shows about foreign countries, they do hone in on the personal relationships between people that come from differing cultures or backgrounds, and then you learn that, impossibly enough, that you have a lot in common with other people. And if you just talk to them about their families or their pets or anything along those lines, you really have a lot more in common with people than you don't have in common with people. And if your ideology politically doesn't match the other person, I think you can still find meeting grounds, because I don't think there's ever 100% Republican or 100% Democrat, except you do hide behind that shield sometimes for whatever reason, you hide behind the shield instead of just saying, what does it mean to you? And I've asked people, well, do you even understand what it is to be a Republican or a Democrat? What is your point of view about it? You can't get an answer from people sometimes, that you say, what do you think about international politics? What do you think about the economy? Do you think the government should be federally driven or locally driven? People can't answer what the platforms are for parties, and I think that's too bad. And then you're viewed as confrontational if you say to somebody, well, why do you feel that way? That's not what I've heard about it. And people just get very defensive. And that's another thing, that all this unrest has bred very high defensiveness in people, that you can't even say to them, oh, well, just as a matter of pure interest, why do you feel that way? Well, I just feel that way. Oh, and you can't get people to say the next sentence, right, which is, okay, well, why do you feel that way? I'm willing to listen to you, but why do you feel that way? Why is that important to you? And for some topics that are very black and white to people, I understand that. But the fact is that government and politics is much more nuanced than that. There are things that you vote for funding. There are things that you place at the top of your priority list as to what you want to put money behind or energy behind or a movement behind. And getting to the bottom of all that, I think, creates unity, or at least some kind of a place where people can sit and talk together. It's like we're just going to agree to meet at our favorite restaurant. I mean, you can do that. We can agree that we can meet at a favorite restaurant and have a conversation. But I think that's missing now, because people just shut out other information and are unwilling to listen to other people as soon as they learn something about that person, whatever that may be.
So true.
Here's an example. So I'm a Republican, but I didn't run on the Republican Party. I ran as, this is my background, here's my love and passion for the city of Burbank, and I want to work with the current council members on the council. So I didn't get any local elected leaders' endorsements when I first ran. So when my first term was over and I was running for a second term, I was so honored and blessed that our Congressman, Adam Schiff, State Senator Portantino, Assemblymember Laura Friedman, and the only Republican at that time was Supervisor Mike Antonovich from the county. But I got their endorsements, and it wasn't about the party. It was about what I accomplished in my first term, that they endorsed me outside of the party lines, because they also have interests in the city of Burbank and its working relationship with its elected body. Now, this last election that just happened, 18 months ago now, well, less than 18, we had a Republican school board member that went to the same folks that endorsed her the same time I was running the first time. They didn't endorse her because she was a Republican. And there was one school board member that endorsed the Republican incumbent because he also believed that at the local level in the city of Burbank, it doesn't matter what party, what matters is your substance, your background, your decision-making, your collaboration, that he endorsed her, but the Burbank Democratic Club did not endorse him because, unbeknownst to me till after the election, they had made a pact with themselves that they would not endorse anybody that was not a Democrat. And that left me scratching my head, because to the average resident in Burbank, all politics are local. And when Anja was there, my first term, people would compliment the council members as a body, because they would say, I wish Washington can learn from you guys, that you guys like each other, you can work together, you can disagree, but bring out the best policy moving forward that's in the best interest of the people, of the city. That has changed today.
Wow.
And I'd like to comment on that a little further. It's another issue that's a national issue that does boil down to local level too, which is who votes in your community. And so in Burbank, the elections, a pretty small percentage of the population votes. So those are people that are driving the results of an election, whatever your party affiliation is. So if you're going to get more leaning towards one side or the other, and politics is brought into it, I think it can impact how an election goes and whether people get elected or not. And it's the same not only on the local level. If that's what you're going to shine the light on, that's what people are going to pay attention to. If you don't shine the light on it, then people do listen to what you have to say, as opposed to your party affiliation or whether you're writing that vote with your party affiliation. And again, it's just another tool by people to divide, actually, instead of trying to reach a consensus on things that are important to everybody in a local community, which is keeping your utilities on, keeping the prices of your utilities down, making sure your police and fire are funded enough to protect your community, making sure you have a good school district that you're helping with funds. So these are all things that everybody agrees on. And if that's your mind when you run for office and that's what you state to people, it should be enough. But sometimes it's not, because the squeaky wheels may be the ones voting or encouraging their other squeaky wheels to vote, and it can kind of sway the way an election goes too, which is true on a national level or a state level or even a very local level like this, if that's what you're going to shine the light on. Now, clearly state politics, the horse has left the barn. It's going to be party driven, as are the national elections. But I think before, the local elections at least seem to be sort of untouched by that, so you could actually do business. And right now the climate, I think, has changed so that is not the case anymore, which is unfortunate, because all it does is kind of put a big stop sign into doing something we all want to do, but you're just going to say no. You're going to be a knower instead of a yeser just because it comes from the mouth of another person.
Yeah, I was going to segue right into kind of a next question and topic, which is the age of the internet. And it's, so funny. I've talked about this with our podcast team many times, and I've mentioned this on this podcast a few times. And Bob, I mentioned this before you got into the room that here in Indianapolis, where I am, I voted for Trump in the 2016 election. I was in a red team echo chamber here. All the things I followed, listened to, watched, all were in my team, in my bubble. So back then, I would not have been able to have a conversation with the two of you from California because, well, you're obviously in California, which is all people who don't care about any of us in Indiana, and you're all Democrats, you're all the blue team, the evil people. So that's so funny how we've come so far, and the age of the internet has allowed people like me to discover other things and other ways to view things. But how has the age of internet changed the way local politics are going, and from your perspective, Bob?
I'm getting calls. We have a sensitive issue in our city involving a small restaurant in our city. And I always tell people, especially with the internet, there's their story, there's the media story, and there's the facts. If people see it on the internet, because I've been getting calls from across the country and emails from very angry folks that think that we're tyrants and we're just putting the boots to this one establishment, because that's what they heard on the internet. And I just kind of cracked up because somebody said to me, I should give them my salary to help small businesses because somebody put on the internet that the mayor of the city of Burbank makes $183,000 a year. When in reality, we're a part-time government. We barely make $1,400 a month, and then they take taxes out. To be an elected official, it's because you have a passion. But getting back to your question, the internet is Buck Rogers in the 21st century, okay? If you see it on the internet, it has to be the gospel. It has to be the truth. The problem with that is it's easier for an individual, regardless of where they're from, that they want to pick an issue in Burbank, then they'll sit behind the keyboard and they'll just boom, 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 just go back and forth. But they don't necessarily have all the information. The internet does not allow me to speak with somebody, whether telephonically so they can hear my voice, or again, meet with me in public, in person, at a coffee setting. I used to meet a lot of people at McDonald's by the airport because they had a couch there. And I would hold my coffees there with people, and we would talk about issues that the media took away. So people can't see my facial expressions first on. They can't see my body language when I'm trying to say, hey, no, you don't have quite the information. The internet, as powerful as it is, immediately information, immediate news, connectivity, that's great. I embrace it. But it's troubling when people think it's gospel and are not willing to, wait, let me slow down. Let me get a whole picture to make sure I have all the important information. That's what the internet has put us in today.
Yeah, and back to what the two of you were mentioning earlier, as far as, labeling and the teams and the divisiveness of Republican versus Democrat, that hasn't been that way in local politics. When you look up the two of you, you Google the two of you, Anja, you don't come up as a party member one way, but Bob, you do. So maybe somebody could know all they need to know about you as soon as they see that label, right? Like you mentioned before.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And the effect of the media is because it is so pervasive now and so accessible to everybody by so many means, and starting when people are very young, it's a problem that there's a lot of erroneous information. And I think we're all well aware of other entities or countries that are propagating false news, but they make it look real. That's the thing. My family has all political leanings and very different points of view on a lot of things. And one day my sister said something, and I said, well, where did you hear that? Because it just sounded so outrageous and crazy to me. And I don't mean to label or anything, but honestly, it was just so in left field. And I said, where did you get that? I researched it. Where did you research it? Because you think you can be led to believe you're actually researching something and you're going down a rabbit hole, but that rabbit hole is very deep and dug very well. And because she actually was firmly convinced that whatever she was saying was correct. And I said, that just sounds really wacky to me. I don't know where you got that. And so it's really easy for people to back up whatever their leanings are on any topic from the internet, because the internet, if you want something to back you up, you are going to find it, and it's going to validate your point of view, and you're not going to listen to what anybody else has to say. And it's so hard to differentiate between what's real and what's not real these days, and the internet just is in your face so much. But the media has always had control since the beginning of history in the United States. It used to be newspapers, or it used to be flyers, whatever it happened to be. There was always a point of view that was trying to get out by the publisher of these things, and the internet is no different. And the effect is the same. You can persuade people since the beginning of the history of the United States to a particular point of view. And it turns out human beings are pretty susceptible to information coming from these sources, thinking it's reliable when actually it won't be. I think it's just human frailty and then of course we glom onto things that might agree, that might kind of be going down the same road that we're kind of thinking, and then you kind of take off with it and run instead of sitting back and questioning. So there's not a lot of real questioning going on in information. And you're supposed to go to college and you're supposed to learn that. And even in high school, they teach you classes about testing information that's coming your way, test the information in certain ways. It's just really hard with the internet to test information anymore. So that's a problem with the internet, I think.
So true. And so if I'm an activist, say I'm an 18, 19-year-old, 22-year-old, or just any kind of activist, we see so many activists now that, use the internet, use Twitter, Facebook, whatever it may be, to try to, truly make a difference. But if I wanted to make a difference and start with local politics, how might I go about that? And, how could that be different than doing that at the state or federal level?
I think the question is what you want to make a difference in, because there's going to be varying routes to get where you want to go. So that's the first question. What is it you want to make a difference in? And once you've established that, I think there's a lot of outlets for people to make a difference. If your issue is homelessness, well, of course, then you get the statistics and see what the city's doing about it. If your issue is arts and culture, and why aren't we funding that? Then, of course, you find out the information about what's available and ask questions of the right people. So I think depending on what your particular issue is, and it could be a wide variety of things, why are the utilities going up by this much? Well, then you have to look, why are the utilities going up? Question it and find out what the basis is for any increases in services, and a lot of it's dependent on what's going on in the world. If your interest is recycling, because you want to make the planet a cleaner, better place for future generations, and then you look at the recycling center in Burbank. What's the history of that recycling center? What's going on? And there's a lot of things that have happened in the world that have put a halt to actually effective recycling, in not only local, because we have a local recycling program, as well as the county has the same problem. So you just you expound upon that, and pretty soon you see trash is ending up and not being taken by China anymore. So local things, if that's your interest, can spread out to the entire world, and recycling is a good example. So I think you just have to look at what your interest is and see what we're doing on the local level. And honestly, there's some issues that are being ignored on a local level, or maybe not enough attention is being paid to those. And maybe you're the person who could take that up and gather your forces to make a difference in whatever the particular area happens to be. And there are so many issues in the world that do need addressing, and not enough people to do it, because most people just want to live their lives, go to work, raise their children, and right now school their children at home or work at home. So it's hard to sort of make an impact in an area you want to. So it's hard enough when the world is not shut down, but to do it when it's shut down, I think, is even harder. But I think it's just finding out what excites you and just dig in and get your information as best you can, which may involve the internet. But on local politics, the internet information is not going to be so erroneous, I think. You're going to know there's a recycling center. You're going to know there's domestic violence work being done in this community. You're going to know that homelessness is being addressed in a particular way. So there is ways to find out on a local level what's going on the local level, and you can very quickly find out who to talk to. The city council on a local level is easily accessible by email. Bob will sit down and talk to you. All of us will sit down and talk to you. We'd all visit you in your homes if you want to collect a group of people. So that on a local level, you can actually make a really good impact on whatever your particular issue is. That's what I think, because I saw that demonstrated. My interest at the time I got on the council was the arts, because I have my undergraduate degrees in the arts. And I've always loved the arts and supporting the arts and making sure that the arts are funded in the schools and that children have exposure to the arts, because we know what that does to a human being if you're exposed to the arts throughout your lifetime. It makes you a better human being, essentially. And so you just have to gather your forces to support your cause. And whatever your cause is, you're going to find backup here. There's programs for veterans here. There's just a lot of programs that, if whatever your particular interest is, you can certainly address it on the local level. And if you can address it in the local level, it's like throwing a rock in a pond. The circles can spread. That's what I think about people's involvement and how you can address local issues and expound on that to make an impact in not only your local government, but maybe in the world, depending on what your issue is.
I couldn't have said it any different, what Anja just said, and I agree 100%. But I also give you as the activist the responsibility by saying, hey, wait a minute. First, learn about the city of Burbank, learn about its neighborhoods, learn about why Burbank is the way it is. Yes, we're neighbors to LA. Yes, we're neighbors to North Hollywood and Glendale. Look at the best practices, but don't be a change agent to change without first doing your research and how it's going to impact the city of Burbank. Because what we're having today is, with all the national issues that are going on, they're filtering down to the city of Burbank. And I always stop and say, wait a minute. It's great to have the discussion. It's great to look at best practices in another city. But when I meet young activists up and coming, I said, whoa, wait a minute. Let's get back to Burbank. Let's get back to 17 square miles. Let's look at the policies. Let's not go out and do the national agenda right now. Let's look at the discussions that are going across the country, the social economic issues across the country, but let's be realistic. Let's look at the situation here in Burbank. How is this equal or different, or do we have a better system in place? A lot of young activists don't look at that.
The other thing is that maybe some activists don't flesh out the implications of what they want done. And a really great example is people want speed bumps on their streets, because if people are going down my street too fast, it's endangering the children. And there's always a discussion about, well, if we put speed bumps on your street, the next street over is then going to get the speeding traffic. And when do we stop the speed bumps, right? Because it's one street out, and pretty soon the whole city's full of speed bumps. So you have to have a collective discussion about what the impact is of putting speed bumps on your one street. And the traffic people try to get the traffic to move to the busier streets to keep people off the residential streets so that people aren't speeding down the streets with children. And that's a good example of activists maybe not thinking to the next step. And that's a really local, good, concrete example that speed bumps make an impact. Reducing the speed, adding bike lanes, which was controversial for a while, adding bike lanes to the streets, or putting lights in particular places, or timing the lights differently. All these little local things have an impact out there. So, and that's about traffic, which is really boring, but it's a really good example about what happens if you change one street. And it's the same thing on many levels for many issues that people are concerned with. Well, fine, you don't want this, but this is what's going to happen. If we accept your point of view 100% and there's no discussion, there's going to be implications from a decision made to please you or your party or your special group that impacts the entire community and maybe eventually impacts the entire country. So that's why you can't just hone into one person's point of view and just accept it and then get on that horse and ride it across the country, because there's going to be implications from doing that. And people don't sit back and think about that, which is unfortunate. Just a cool head, a little bit of discussion. Hey, did you think about what would happen? If we put a speed bump on your street, what about your person that lives behind you? You friends with that person? Are they going to appreciate the diversion of traffic to their street? Then maybe they have 5 kids, you only have 1. I mean, you get into these kind of discussions that, your value systems can get tested, but maybe in a good way, so that you can open a dialogue about why you want it and did you think about the impact, and maybe there's a different solution for the speeding down your street instead of putting speed bumps and then shifting the impact of that to your neighbors. So I think it's always good to have a discussion about that. And I don't think people intentionally want to do things that hurt their neighbors. I just don't think people are that evilly motivated. And you have to say that to people. Listen, I know you're trying to do something good. I get it. You don't want people speeding down your street. But so then have a discussion about it, and don't automatically impute an evil motive to somebody because they have an opinion about something that's different from yours. You just can't do that. You have to give them a chance to say what they want to say, and then have a dialogue with them about, well, here's the implications of that.
So you're saying that President Biden and U.S. Congress don't have an effect on the speed bumps in Burbank?
That's what I'm saying, actually. Well, you know what? I take it back, because we do get federal funding that filters down to the local economy. So I guess I can't even say that, because we do know that money filters down. And I know that California has a surplus now, so that filters down to local government. So actually, it probably could, in some peripheral way, actually have an impact on a local
Very indirect.
government.
Yeah.
Yeah, very indirect, but it could.
But you probably won't see a big debate on Twitter about the speed bumps in Burbank.
No,
Right.
that's not sexy. Yeah, people
Right.
want sexy stuff. It's just not sexy enough for people
But
to get into a dialogue.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, you're right, because I leave my neighborhood, and I just noticed this morning, I think they're widening the street outside of the neighborhood. And I hadn't noticed that before. And that's a huge impact in my everyday. I travel that road every day. So something like that, I need to figure out if, what's going on with that. And that's at my very local level to do so.
Well, it is. And when they widen your street, are they taking away some of your grass on the parkway so that your dog doesn't get to pee where he wants to pee anymore? And are they narrowing your sidewalks so that now you're fighting with rollerbladers and bicycles on the sidewalk because they widened the street? So I know there's probably some policy argument about why we widen the street, because they want the traffic flow to be better, but there are going to be impacts. It could be right outside your door. And I'm sure that before they did that, I would hope that they would have a dialogue about it. Maybe not. Maybe traffic just made a decision about it, because maybe you elected your local officials to handle that for you, and that's what they did. Yeah. But, you have a voice. You can speak up and say, hey, wait a minute, you squawk loud enough, maybe you can get some action on even something like widening a street.
Very good. Very good insight there. A lot of people can learn from this information and this kind of advice. So for both of you, the next 5 years, how do we lead the communities better? Where is Burbank going that maybe sets itself apart from other areas? Bob?
That's a very tough question. I'm going to go back to what Anja said, and she's so correct. We need a cooling off period. Right now, I honestly don't know, because we're so divided on the party. We're divided on the national social issues and how they apply to Burbank, and people, they're not really thinking about everything, but they're demanding action today. And so with us having a recall of a governor, we've got election in 2 more years, I don't have a solid answer of how Burbank is going to move forward. And a lot has to do with the demographics that are changing in Burbank. When I first moved here, it was a joke. The sidewalks rolled up at night, 9 o'clock at night, and it was quiet. You can hear the crickets hiding in the bushes, cricketing. Today, the majority of the voters in Burbank are about 38 years old with 2 kids. It's no longer it was more of a senior-based voter block.
Yeah.
So I don't know in 5 years. I just want to preserve and protect the services of the city, work on the budget and the shortfalls of this COVID-19, and make sure that I am leading the city as its mayor for its economics, for its security, for its families, keeping the lights on. But the leadership outside of that, really it's its people. Because its people will decide in 18 months if they're going to re-elect me again, or there's 3 of us up for re-election. Get rid of the 3 of us and put 3 more people in. That's at the choice of the voters, of the people at large.
So Bob's taking a very local view of the next 5 years, and I'm taking a longer view of that because I'm not in the heart of local politics like Bob is right now. So I'm out of the heart of local politics. And I've always held a belief for a long time, history does repeat itself. And historically, over the last 200 or 300 years, if you look at the turn of the century, there's always a wave of conservatism followed by a wave of the roaring 20s. And I think that's where we are now. And it followed a pandemic 100 years ago, and 200 years ago it was something else. So traditionally there's this, and then there's waves of nationalism, and we've seen it all before. There's nothing new happening today. And so I think we're going to be, especially now after a pandemic, people are itching to get out. And I think we're heading towards the roaring 20s is actually what I think is going to happen. I think people are going to spend their money in restaurants. I think people are going to go a little nuts, go back to Vegas, do whatever they want to do. And I think we're going to have a very different climate. I don't think it's going to be sad. I think it's going to be joyful, and people are going to be glad to get out, be with their families, because that's what everybody's aching for. And over history, that's what has happened, that there are the politics goes in waves. There's conservative waves, depending on what people's particular unhappiness is at any point. There's waves of liberalism, there's waves of, and we just saw it in this election, right? We had one guy, and then now we're going to try the other guy, and that's what's great about the United States. We don't like that guy. We know that eventually we can do something about it. And same in local politics. So if you really don't like that guy, or if you really want to shake up the tree a little bit, so then you elect an upstart. And that's what we saw with Trump. We saw dissatisfaction, and we saw that people wanted an upstart for the sake of having an upstart. Not because they believed in any particular ideology. They just were tired of the same old, same old. And this has happened throughout history, that people get tired of the same old and tired of hearing the same thing. And then, then people kind of regress back to what it was before and get complacent. So my view of the next 5 years, I think it's going to be positive. The economy's doing good and has been doing good the last few years. But if history is our friend and we listen to history, we know that that could crash at any time. And we've seen a real estate crash back in 2018. And so you just have to kind of keep an eye on your future. And then I think what you can do at local politics is put money in the bank, basically, and make sure that when things are really good, that you have something in the bank for when times are not so good. And but I think that the next few years probably are going to be good times for the United States and good times for a lot of people that like to drink and party, honestly. I think that's what people are going to do. I think people want to have some fun now, and they're going to pay less attention to politics now because they want to have some fun and get back to, we don't care about politics anymore, except for some small group of people that are passionate about whatever their topic happens to be. So that's how I think we're looking at the next 5 years.
Well, I hope so. And then we at the Unity Now podcast, we try to focus on dissolving the team structure and really looking at it from a, power of the people sort of perspective. And, Burbank really seems to embody that sort of process to, elect people from the general public who serve their term and then move on, basically, right? So what do you guys think about that? And what could state and federal politicians and, the electoral process, how can they learn from that to get the public more engaged in the election process? Bob?
Wow. I've always been a believer in term limits. And I believe at the national level, in my humble opinion, as one person, when you have, whether it's the president 40 years, or you have Congressman Schiff 20 years, Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi, those are now institutionalized politicians. And the very main line, whether they're Republican-based or Democratic-based, the party always votes them in. I believe that with the younger generation, where I'm seeing, again, my eyes are at the local level because that's where I'm entrenched. And I saw this in our last election because the more conservative Republican candidate who is involved in the Boys and Girls Club, the Chamber, the Rotary, family, kids going to local schools here. Before President Trump was in office, before his time, he would have been the biggest vote getter. But I believe the newer generation, the younger folks, are looking at like Congresswoman Cortez, that younger, more energetic, bringing a whole different perspective to the national conversation, the national level. I really believe it's going to changes of institutionalized politicians. The younger generation is already getting more engaged. They're speaking up. They're seeing the power of their voices. They're seeing the power of their protest. They're seeing the power of blocks of voting. And I bring it back to the county board of supervisors and the newly elected sheriff. The people brought in a more less experience compared to the current sheriff, who was a Republican. The new guy was a Democrat who supported all the different social changes in our justice system. And we've never had an incumbent, and most of the sheriffs have always been Republican, law and order, ever get voted out. It changed. And if you look at the district attorney's race in the county of LA, you had a more of a moderate Democrat, Jackie Lacey, first African-American woman, heading up the county of LA district attorney's office. With all the Black Lives movement, I thought for sure she was a shoo-in. I voted for her. I thought she was a good DA. Knowing the current district attorney, Mr. Gascon, and what he did up in San Francisco and how things have changed and all the videos, and I got emails from the police union, council members that, hey, you guys shouldn't really vote for him. But the masses in California, the biggest voter bloc, were a blue state. And the younger people were really engaged in getting their candidate of choice to get elected. So I really believe moving forward, it's that younger generation that's going to put younger politicians in these very important congressional and Senate seats in the future that are going to, I would say, energize the voter bloc versus the same old politicians that have been there forever, that frankly, my perspective, humbly, is they're part of the problem. Because their optics are what they believe. But we at the local level, or just regular residents, have a different view of homelessness, of environmental concerns, of equality, taxes. So there's a big disconnect.
I think to piggyback on what Bob has said, I think it boils down to voting for who you want. And whether that's an energized new activist, whether it's your old crony. Now, Bob had said term limits, and there's pluses and minuses to term limits, because if you have, on a local level, it's a little easier to integrate into politics and get up to speed. But on a state or national level, I think it's much harder to get up to speed. And the problem is if you keep having new people in, we might have what we have now, which is, a gridlock, basically. And so I think there's some benefit to some term limits, or at least some watchdogging of these people, and at least some exposure of what they're doing, because some of the old cronies, have been getting funding for their states, and while everybody else is sleeping, and it's not fair. And I know in California in particular has funded a lot of those states. And I know that we're all supposed to work together, but it just seems unfair sometimes that somebody that has that much power to divert money from other states into their state for all their local causes. And the way to get them out is to vote them out, but there doesn't seem to be an appetite for that in many jurisdictions. But the answer is always voting. And at some point, maybe something happens to oust someone. And saying term limits is the answer, I don't think is the complete answer, because again, you don't want people getting up to speed because it takes years to do that. The other thing with is establishing relationships, because Bob has talked a lot about relationships, and we both talked about relationships with each other or with your community. And if you keep spinning the wheel and putting new people in there, then it's hard to establish those relationships. It's hard to build coalition. It's hard to reach across the table. And I know that President Biden, that was his goal, and he was known for that in the past. And it's nice that he's optimistic that perhaps that can happen. I don't think in this climate it will happen, but it's a good attitude to have. And if enough people have an open attitude like that, maybe there can be some progress. And throughout history, and again, I go back to history, there have been periods of time in American history where there is reaching across the table, and then everybody scatters to the winds like cockroaches. And then people do come back at some point. So I think we're just going through a rough patch right now that it's not so easy to do that, and certainly easier said than done. So it's just people got to vote and pay attention to what's going on. But you have to make it interesting enough to people, because most people just live their lives and really couldn't care less unless it's some particular hot button issue that's got them riled up. And unfortunately, people aren't always riled up for the daily politics of life and the daily decisions that are made on the state level or at Washington. So, and that's unfortunate. And again, then we go back to the media. Well, perhaps the portrayal and the information that is being given to people isn't adequate enough because it's biased or it's wrong or whatever the reason is. So people really don't get good information. So you don't know what's going on. And unless there's some big expose and there's a television show that somebody wants to watch about it, well, then people are going to pay attention to the McDonald's scandal, and things like that. So it's never tough. I mean, you can talk, but you don't solve all the world's problems, at least not in this day and age, by even trying to have a dialogue, because it just, not only Bob and I have to have a dialogue, and everybody in the room has to have a dialogue, and you got to, go up the ladder on the dialogue. And it's tough. It's tough. It's a big country. There's a lot of people, and it's tough. So I guess on the local politics, you get in and you make incremental changes, and you feel like you didn't do that much, but you did make an incremental change, and then you made the next incremental change. And if that kind of fans out to the country, then I think you can make progress on a lot of issues.
Well, I know we're running out of time, and I appreciate both of your time tonight. So one more question, if you don't mind. If you could both tell me which direction you lean, right or left, usually, and then what do you appreciate about the other side? Anja?
Well, I'm a Democrat, and of course, I guess that means I lean left on social issues and on economic issues. At this point in my life, I want to save money and save taxes, and I prefer not to give the government my money. So I guess I'm sort of right on those topics. Not extreme right, though, and I do think corporations should pay their fair share of taxes, and I'm willing to pay my fair share of taxes, but if I can shave it here and there, I'm all for that. I think that makes me more of a Republican, and a lot of people mistake my attitude for being more Republican and are surprised to hear I'm a Democrat. But then again, people don't talk to you about what is your point of view on this particular issue, because then they would know. They would know if they asked me about some issues. Well, yeah, I believe in this, and this, and this, and on these topics, I believe in that. So overall, though, I'm definitely left-leaning, and particularly on social issues, but not particularly on economic issues.
And is there one thing you might say you appreciate about the folks that lean a little more right, a little more conservative?
Yeah, I appreciate their economic points of view, and I'm willing to listen to it. And the further they lean, like I said, it's, if I'm all the way over here on an issue and they're all the way over here, you can maybe come together at some point to have some sort of medium resolution on taxes, whether it's, for example, that you, instead of doing a 35% across the board corporate tax, maybe you agree on some other number with some other capitulations about how that's going to work and all that kind of stuff. So I think that people can agree on a lot more than they think they can if they just kind of have a dialogue and try to talk to each other and actually ask people, what is it you think about that? you know. And then one thing is nationalism and isolationism. I get that. That's a pretty, people either say it's all about America, or rest of the world, forget about the rest of the world. And other people say, well, they take a different view that no, we have to support the rest of the world and try to help people, for example, India, to give them vaccinations. So I can see that some people say it's all about America or it's all about Burbank. I understand that point of view 100%, and once in a while I kind of get grumpy and I feel the same way. And other days I think, we really should be helping out the people in the world because it is only one world. And so I think I have pretty liberal views of my liberalism, I guess.
It's a funny question because a lot of people think I'm a Democrat because I generally am a progressive type of Republican. The one thing that I kind of follow the party is I am a law and order kind of guy. I definitely do not like higher taxes, and I like to make sure that we have a solid economic, vibrant community with less government. That to me, and I also believe strongly in personal accountability for people's action. But I generally, because since I've been on this council, I really try to make decisions that benefit the masses at large and benefit the people that put me in office. And so I remember the first time I ran, they heard my spiel when I was campaigning and nobody knew who I was, that 3 times I got packages in the mail to fill out for the Democratic Club's endorsement for my campaign. And it wasn't until the 3rd time they finally called me and they wanted to know why I was dismissing them. And I said, either you guys are joking with me or you're really supporting the nonpartisan race, then I'll definitely submit it. And they say, you're a Democrat. We've heard you talk. We've asked you questions. And I said, no, I'm actually a registered Republican since I was 18 years old. But he said, some of your views are along the Democratic Party lines. I said, I do believe in public transportation. I do believe in proper funding in our schools for our children. I do believe in feeding our seniors and providing meal programs for kids that are low income and they need food to re-energize the body so they can learn. I like that, and I also believe in the responsibility of leaving our planet, at least while I'm alive and in this position that I'm at as a council member, that I make decisions where I compliment the Democrats on their views of the environment, on what we need to do, and not be reckless in taking care of our earth, our planet. And so I always, just pretty much right down the middle, in a nonpartisan way, which kind of leads me to being identified that I'm a Democrat. But when people really look me up, they said, oh, wow, I never knew you're a Republican. You don't vote that way. And I tell people, I vote based upon the information that I receive in my agenda package. I make a decision based upon talking to residents to see how this policy or ordinance I'm going to be voting on is impacting their life, their neighborhood, and how it's going to possibly impact our business community. And that goes way beyond the party lines, because some of it is actually pretty good policy. And then there's the stuff that I've argued where when they wanted to pass and have the council support the gasoline tax across the state, I took a very no approach. That's new taxes. It's 12 cents more a gallon. And I look at, again, my priority is here locally. For the amount of money we're paying in taxes, this is where I disagree with my colleagues respectfully. No, it's going to go to other people. I was adamant when they did the homeless tax, and I did the math. I said, wait a minute, we're going to give the county of LA, that's going to in turn give it to Palmdale, which is very poor, LA City, and Cudahy, Bell Gardens, all these other cities that are poor, but we're taking $9 million from the taxpayers of Burbank and we're giving it to other cities. And we've only been able to get $77,000 back for our 280 homeless people. So positions like that, the Republican in me comes out, and I don't want to take a position of support as a body. I always say I want to respect the voters. Let them make the decision. But for us as a council body, no. So stuff like that, yeah, the Republican in comes me out. But on environmental issues, with our utility, the recycling center, and most important, community gardens, I thank my colleagues that are Democrat, because I'm the only Republican on the council, because I think they're doing a great job on their ideas, bringing it forward. Yeah, I can tweak it a little bit here and there, but I do appreciate their passion for the environment, their passion for family and public transportation, and taking care of the nutritional needs of not just seniors, but children.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Bob too. I think the greatest compliment, besides I look a lot younger than I am, is I didn't know that you were a Democrat. And so it always makes me laugh, and I go, well, why? First of all, why are you even thinking along those lines, because the people just go, they'll say something to me and they'll go, well, I'm not sure if you agree with my point of view. And I go, it's your point of view. It's fine. I'm not going to kick you out of my office because you said something I may not agree with. And most of the time I kind of might agree with them 30%. So where Bob leaves his party platform to go over here on social issues, I leave my party platform to go over there on economic issues. I'm with him. I don't want to pay 12 cents more for taxes that goes somewhere else. So when it comes to that kind of stuff, and it concerns my money, and it concerns someone else telling me what to do with my money on a local level, yeah, I'm gonna be Republican on those issues, and I'm not gonna vote for that, and I don't want that, and I don't want to vote for people who are going to support the federal government raining down from on high, telling me what I'm going to do here in Burbank and how much I'm going to pay for my gas or any other thing that has an economic effect on my daily life. So Bob and I are the opposites, but we have the same points of view. It's really kind of ironic that, just because you label a person Democrat, Republican, him and I are the same going down the line. It's easy to do. And Bob and I have been friends for a long time. So I never even knew he was a Republican either. So it's just like, I never thought to ask. All I know is how he feels about certain issues. And it'd be nice if we could get rid of the politics and the parties and just everybody run on who you are. And, and I know we started the country with the one party system until after a few years. But it's too bad it just disintegrated into what it is today. And it's too bad we're in a climate right now that's kind of negative.
But what's, to me, and it comes from my heart, what's really important in this position wasn't to get elected because I was a Republican, but I wanted them to look at my background as a police officer and how I've been the recipient of the LA City Council policies and how that has impacted the social issues within a community, that as law enforcement, you're the first arm of government that people interact with. But I have to follow policies and procedures at the local, county, state, and national level. And I really take a lot of pride when people say, oh, I never thought you were Republican. And I tell them, I never ran because our local government is nonpartisan. It doesn't matter that I'm working with Anja, who's a Democrat, or in my current council right now, that all Democrats. I said, but what really matters is your quality of life. I want to work on issues to help you and your family. I want to look at future issues. I want to make policy decisions to make sure that when I'm out of office, that the policies I decided 10, 15, 20 years ago really made a good change, because I'm really interested is the quality of life. I don't want to get bogged down on the politics that happens in Washington or even in Sacramento, but I want to pass a budget on time. I want to make sure that if a council member has a great idea that's going to improve services, whether it's seniors, kids, or a community garden or speed bumps, you have to be a collaborator. You have to put party politics to the side and look at the agenda. And if I don't agree, I'm going to vote no. But I'm going to articulate and justify my vote on why I disagree on this policy. And when that policy is done and I lost or I won, if I won, I don't gloat. If I lost, I don't beat up my colleagues. This is a democratic process. This is my voice. I took a vote. It's done. Let's work on the next project, the next agenda, or the next great idea to keep Burbank at the front edge of its services, its quality of life, and most important, its neighborhoods for its people.
And quit saying I didn't know you were Republican
Sorry.
when you meant to say I didn't know you were a serial killer. That's
Oh,
what it
sorry.
always sounds like when people say that. I didn't know you were a serial killer. That's interesting. Like, I don't know why even people say that kind of stuff. It kind of makes me laugh and go, yeah, we just kind of go along. Not that it made a difference in our conversation, but it's
Yeah,
just funny.
I'm staring at the Google page, Bob. It says you're Democratic member. You're a member of the Democratic Party right here.
I don't know why that says that.
Yeah.
I am shocked, but you know what? It's okay.
It doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
What matters to me is people have trusted me to reelect me again based on my performance. That's all I care. It's about my performance.
Ironically,
stay in
I get a
office.
lot of Republican material too. It's kind of ironic when I don't go around telling people I am a Democrat, but I do get a lot of Republican stuff telling me what the agenda is and who I should be voting for. So I don't know how that stuff, it's the media or something. Somebody doesn't get their facts right again. Not that I don't mind reading it though. You know, I get to read the other person's point of view because you don't get to do that a lot of times because you only get mail from your own political party. So I like to get mail on the other party and see what they have to say because I'm probably going to agree with some of it. It's kind of interesting.
And
Yeah.
remember your question about, we're talking about the internet, social media, okay?
Yep.
Thank you. You just quantified what I said earlier. There's that story of the issue, the topic. There's social media's point of view, which has to be the truth. And there's the facts.
Right.
And you just Googled me, which shows me a Democrat. And I've been a Republican since the cute little cheerleader in high school. And I wanted a date with her. And she said, if you sign up, I'll go out. And I went out with her. And I've been a Republican ever since.
So much thought went into that decision, Bob. That's great.
I mean, I was 18 years old. I was in high school.
It's always about a girl.
She was a cheerleader. I'm a boy. I mean, bottom line is, so again, social media, people getting information is great, but verify.
Yeah.
Like Ronald Reagan said, trust, but verify.
Well, it's so important. I think the way you both answered the question gets to the heart of why we asked the question in the first place, which the two of you are first and foremost individuals. And that's it. From that point on, discuss any topic you want with me, but and I might lean one way or the other on each topic, but I'm an individual first and foremost, and that's it. That's where we should start with anyone.
That's right.
Because you know what happens when you're an elected body? Anja and I can share a lot of views, but it's also the most loneliest position because Anja, if she was with me on the council, she was the mayor, I was her vice mayor, because of the open meeting law and the Brown Act, I can't call her up and say, hey, Anja, let's talk about the budget. I want extra funding for a senior citizen healthcare component in next year's budget. And she can agree with me, right? But she needs to stop me by saying, Bob, I'm so sorry. I already spoke to Council Member Z about the budget. And so you do have 5 individuals, but then we come together publicly at an open meeting,
Right.
or unless we're dealing with a personnel matter, real estate, or a lawsuit, then we can meet in closed session. But to me, this council, I'm still trying to mentor my younger 2 colleagues that just got elected, but the former council with council member Emily Gabeletti, Tim Murphy, Sharon Springer, Jess Telemontes, it was interesting how as a body we came together publicly, but some of the people that really liked the Jerry Springer of city council politics, we were very even keel. And there were some hot topics we tackled on, and everybody stayed focused on the topic, but you still saw, according to other people watching the council meetings, that for the first time in a long time, the 5 members actually liked working with each other.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you, before that, we had one council member, oh my God, it was Jerry Springer, especially when you're the mayor, trying to keep them on the agenda and stop showboating or putting the other council, oh man. And so that to me was really a feather in my personal cap when people say, you guys like working with each other. And we tackled a lot of controversial issues.
It's about respect. It's about respect. It really is about respect for another person's point of view, wherever they come from.
Agreed. So we'll go ahead and end it there. For both of you, thank you so much for taking the time and explaining your perspective, your background, and how Burbank, California can be maybe a model for other states and even national politics, but everyone should focus on local politics based on what I've heard from you guys. For both of you, how can people get in touch with you in your office? Bob?
My email address is bfrutos@burbankca.gov. And please put your phone number there, or I don't remember my office number because I got a lot of phone numbers. And I always return calls. Just put down what is the latest time I can call you, because we're a part-time council and I'm still working. And I usually have Sunday, Monday, Tuesdays off, and I usually get home from work at 6. So I spend about 2.5 hours on the phone returning community members' calls. So I definitely like to stay engaged and connected, but please feel free and email me at bfrutos@burbankca.gov.
Thank you. And Anja, you?
I'll tell you all the places you can't reach me. Facebook, Twitter, all of those things that have been abused since they went into effect, and and really create more of a divide. So you just email me, legal Anja, LEGALANJA@AOL. Yes, dinosaur mail. Yes, that's me. Legal Anja at AOL. If you Google me, if you Google me, you get my office phone number. It's not that hard to get a hold of me, and I don't have to do all the other stuff and get mad at. Well, that's the other thing. You get mad at people when you do Facebook and you see what they say. So
yeah,
it's better not to have that much too much information in this age right now. It just makes you mad at other people. I prefer, and I tell my sisters, well, you would have seen it if you were on Facebook. And I say, then we would not be having a conversation, would we? So I like to actually have a conversation with you about something. And so I don't need to read it on Facebook or your Instagram or whatever it happens to be. So I prefer to talk to people and hear what they have to say.
Okay. Yep. Well said. So Bob, Anja, thank you so much again for the time. We know you're very busy, and we appreciate it very much. So to you guys, have a great night.
Thank you, Toby.
Too. Thank you, Toby.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Anja. Bob, thank you.
Thank you for watching the Unity Now podcast. We will be back with another conversation that highlights the political middle ground to unite Americans and end the ideological war. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. Please comment below and hit that subscribe button.